So the PS for Diaspora Jobs, okay, the PS for Diaspora Affairs. He's our next guest, and she's here, Roseline Njogu. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good to have you back.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me back. I think it's been a month since I was last here.
Yes.
Thank you for having me.
I love the blue. What do you call that blue?
Royal blue.
Oh, thank you. I did not know.
It's blue, right?
It's the dark blue. Royal blue. Asante ndu.
Royal blue.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I see on your lapel you have Kenya, Germany. Hey, ni nini bwana?
Well, we are just off signing, and the ink is barely dry on the comprehensive migration and mobility agreement, partnership agreement with Germany. So I am wearing my Kenya Damu and Germany flag, of course.
Okay. Now, City is not here today.
Yes, is there going to be proverbs?
Yes. Proverb for this week is from Libya.
Oh,
What's the capital of Libya?
Tripoli.
Very good.
You're asking a diaspora person.
Yes, Wamaju.
How many Kenyans are in Libya?
Right now, those numbers are not very clear. We evacuated Libya several years back when we had political problems there. We haven't re-established an embassy there. We had to close our embassy there that many years ago. So it's one of the places where we don't have very good systems or control. So we basically tell Kenyans to not work there.
Okay. So for now, at least don't work there as things are getting sorted out. The kind of government they have so far, it's a provisional government. It's, those ones. It's a caretaker sort of government. It's a provisional government with the current president is not president, he's chairman of the Presidential Council. So the presidency is a council. And the chairman is called Mohammed El Menfi. He's the current chair of the Presidential Council. The proverb from Libya for today, he howled before going mad.
He howled before going mad. It sounds like the beginning of a composition. ... He howled before. Okay. What do I think it means?
Yes, that's it. That's the end of the proverb.
He howled before going mad. There are signs, I think. There are signs before certain things happen, or as people say, if I make money, there will be signs. That's not what it means.
They will know.
They will know. They will know. But I think it just means that before it rains, the clouds will gather. Before anything major happens, there will have been signs. So I think you might then use that proverb as a warning, or as to say that these are the warning signs before something happens. Is what I would say. You and your man and Danny.
Don't ignore the signs.
Okay. Yeah.
If you had taken him to hospital when he was howling, maybe you'd have helped him.
Perhaps. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, diaspora people, we want to talk to them as well because, people in Kenya, people abroad, there's a lifestyle. It's an app. It's called Loop.
Yes,
it can serve even you people who are in the diaspora and you're watching the PS this morning. Can you tell them about it?
So imagine you can do everything from one app. You can pay your bills. Doesn't matter where you are. You can move money from your bank account to your mobile wallet. You can also do vice versa. Send it from your mobile wallet back to the bank. All your transactions. And imagine if you were in business as well. You can pay merchants. You can sell. You can buy. You can advertise your products on the app. Yeah. And all we need you to do is download the app. Download it and experience all the amazing things that you can do on this app. And you can even, go ahead and get facilities for credit. I mean, really, anything that you can imagine that you would do with your money and your business and your lifestyle, you can do it on Loop. And that's why they say it's not just transactions or it's not just an app. It actually is a lifestyle.
Indeed.
So that's good, because we're always looking for ways to make movement of money, remittances, or other business that our diaspora are doing easier, faster, cheaper, and so on.
Very good.
Yeah.
Loop it.
So tell us about the trip to Germany and you say it's a big deal.
It is a big deal. It is a big deal. So the trip to Germany was very successful. There were a number of things that were happening. First of all, Kenya was the guest country for what they call the Bürgerfest, or the Citizens Festival, where the German presidency takes time to celebrate volunteers and that kind of thing. And they will usually invite another country to come and showcase its culture and so on. So at the palace, or the Schloss Bellevue, where the palace is, you will do these grand exhibitions. And with Kenya being there, this was the first time a non-European country had been invited as a country of honor. And so we were showcasing our culture, language. There was dancing, there was music. I think Boma's dancers were there. There was nyama choma, mutura. Of course, our usual coffee, tea. Something like 15,000 Germans attended this event over the 2 days. So, of course, a number of them interacted with our culture, ideas of our tourism sites and so on for the first time. So really, you can expect to see an uptick in tourism from that part of the world. But also, it was useful for people to begin to understand Kenyan culture a little more in ways that they haven't interacted with it before. There was so much dancing, there was, DJs and all of that. So it was very exciting. And, on the margins of that, then we did business. One of the things that we did was signing the Comprehensive Migration and Mobility Partnership Agreement, which we will speak about in a little bit. We also signed a 4-way MOU between the government of Kenya, represented by our State Department, Kala Trust, the Friedrich Naumann Foundation, and the Hamburg Chamber of Commerce. And this MOU creates a framework for people to work, or for companies that belong to the Hamburg Chamber of Commerce to outsource part of their work to Kenyans, who then can work offshore. Can quite simply do lots of activities, whether they be accounting, whether they be what kind of jobs, all the way from Kenya.
Yeah.
We held a beautiful diaspora engagement, 2 diaspora engagements. The first one was a Diaspora Talent Conference, where we talked about diaspora talent and how we can make the most out of labor mobility. We had a fantastic diaspora engagement with the president. You might have seen a very lovely town hall where people got to interact and ask all kinds of questions and listen to former Prime Minister Raila singing. And we had a number of meetings. We had one with recruitment agents, both from Kenya and from Germany, convened by the president, so that we can talk about how we would go about now implementing the agreement. So it was really impactful. There were, of course, other meetings, like business meetings with Volkswagen and so on. So it was a very packed 2 days. There was also our team from Diaspora Affairs doing mobile consular services across a number of cities in Germany, as well as doing like a talent fest where they went around different cities talking about Kenyan talent and why Kenyan talent is fantastic and well-trained and so on. So very busy week.
Okay.
Yeah, very busy 3 days.
So
Yeah.
the Comprehensive Migration and Mobility Partnership Agreement.
Yes.
Very many words there.
Yeah,
But
it's very comprehensive.
migration and mobility.
Yeah.
Those are the main words. What do those mean?
So the agreement is set up to create a framework for, on our side, labor to move from Kenya to Germany to meet our needs and to meet Germany's needs. What do I mean? It's a win-win, a mutually beneficial agreement that is set up to create synergies between our 2 markets. We have an surplus of particularly young or youthful talent. And on the other side, you have German companies badly needing labor. Because of the way our demographics in the 2 different countries are set up, you have a situation where in Kenya, you have a youth bulge, as we call it, or an extremely youthful population. 19 and a half years is the median age in Kenya, which means our pyramid looks like a proper pyramid, right? Germany, on the other hand, has an inverted pyramid. Birth rates fell several years back. So what we now have is a much older demographic, an inverted pyramid. So lots of older people, median age is 44, I believe. And then, so you have a very small working population supporting a much larger and retiring population. The last of the baby boomers are now exiting their labor market, which means over the next several years, organically, Germany is not able to keep up its prosperity by relying purely on its own labor. Over the years, it's had migration, particularly from within the EU, from other countries within the EU. Something like 230,000 people have been were commuting from within the EU in 2022 alone to work within Germany. But various sort of pieces of research will indicate that without an intervention, what will happen to Germany is that by something like 2030, the labor gaps will increase to something like anything between 3 to 5 million. If you're a large industrial country, which is the third or the fourth largest economy in the world, the largest in the EU, and you're a large economy that depends on manufacturing, for example, and you don't have the labor to manufacture, then your prosperity starts going down. Some research, I think, from an institute, for example, indicates that that's going to mean a 14% dip in Germany's economic growth by 2030. So it's important to understand that this makes sense for Germany to look for labor. If we don't have labor, if they don't have labor, their economy will go down. On the one hand, so that's the picture on that hand. That's the demand side. The supply side is ours, where we have 1 million young people joining the labor market every year, right? And there aren't 1 million opportunities opening up every single year. So you have a surplus of labor. And I think the last time I was here, we talked about how GOK is dealing with that on a 3-pronged strategy, right? So creating jobs at home, creating jobs online, and finally jobs in the diaspora. So what this agreement, the Comprehensive Migration and Mobility Partnership Agreement does is it creates a framework for those diaspora jobs in Germany. It's a first of its kind agreement, and this is what I mean by that. Many other sort of bilateral labor agreements, and this is not strictly speaking a BLA, but many other BLAs that we've gotten into will usually say, we will take 15,000 healthcare workers from Kenya, such as the agreement we have with the UK. Or we will take 5,000, artisans from Kenya. Or we have a total of, as a country, we can say we have a total of 40,000 nurses required. We will take 5,000 from Kenya, 5,000 from India, and so on and so. So you allocate numbers. This is not that kind of agreement. This agreement is open. It says we have huge needs, and I've described what the market looks like. You've had other numbers, of course, going around, like 250,000, which is what is required year on year. In terms of actually a little more of the research indicates numbers are even larger than that. But so these are the needs. We're giving Kenya, based on Kenyans' ability to meet the requirements of the employer and of the Skilled Immigration Act, I think is what their law is called, opportunities to come and work. Right?
Without a quota.
Without a quota.
Okay.
So that is really the issue that we ought to be concerning ourselves about. There is no quota. You can, quote unquote, drink as much water as you can, right? And that is the point of this. That's why this agreement is different, and it's a good one also, because not only are we talking about then access to their labor, to their market, and Kenyans being able to go and work, but we've also done work in that agreement on issues like recognition of Kenyan skills, Kenyan's accreditation, Kenyan's certificates. We've done work on attempting to twin different sort of TVET institutions, where we say there's this TVET somewhere in Kirinyaga and there is this TVET somewhere in Bremen. How can we make these two work together so that there is co-learning, co-teaching, exchange programs, and that kind of thing? So we're building up on that agreement many different kinds of projects.
But this work is skilled work.
Yes.
And this where there's needed to have some kind of caution applied when, of course, everything came out into the open and many questions were being asked. So I just wanted to go over a couple of things so that it is clear for everybody that what we're saying is that there's an agreement between two governments, Kenya and Germany, whereby Germany has said that there are jobs that they have to fill because they just don't have enough. And Kenya has said there are people who can do these jobs.
Yes.
But we're not saying that the floodgates are open and come as you please. We're just saying that they're skilled jobs, and you have to meet the requirement and apply for the jobs in order to have them? Or are we saying that there's a platform upon which these jobs are going to be placed, and if you apply for it and you meet the match, then you may go?
So that's a really good question. There is the agreement by government, but remember, most of these opportunities exist in the private sector. Okay, so what that means is that I still have to apply for a job. I still have to be matched, or I have to match myself to an employer who then says, okay, so this is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a journalist with this kind of qualifications. This person meets the bill, and then we start the migration process, right? And the processes for moving. So let me say something before I talk about the processes for moving. Skilled workers are a broad category, right? So it is not just, by German definitions, bakers are skilled workers, hairdressers are skilled workers. So skilled workers are broader than what I think many people think of when they think of professional.
In Kenya.
Yeah, maybe people...
So, for example, if you say a plumber in Germany and a plumber in Kenya,
that's a skilled
we
worker.
see them differently, but in Germany, it's a skilled worker.
Okay. So skilled workers are what
But also
they're
we're talking
looking
about
for.
a plumber in Kenya who has gone through training and has certification.
Yes.
Not
a guy.
Not
Kawaya.
Kawaya.
Not a guy who learned by, just walking through. Sawa.
Yes.
Okay.
So we have the definition, right, of skilled workers, right? It has to be somebody whose profession or whose skill is recognized, and and there's processes and they have quite a bureaucracy about recognizing this, your skill and your school and that kind of thing. Now, the processes on how you get these jobs, and this is a question a lot of people are asking. Is this. There are at least 3 different ways. One, most jobs in Germany are going to be advertised on a German government website called makeitingermany.com. And if you look at our social media, Diaspora _KE, I think my team is putting that information out there. So makeitingermany.com is a place where you can find a lot of information around what jobs exist, and you will be able to see the 30, 40, 50, however many thousand jobs are there. And then you can search by, journalist, or by city, or by that kind of thing, right? So the different filters. You can find those opportunities there, and those opportunities are open to foreign labor. So then you can start from there. There's more information around how you would migrate and that kind of thing on, I want to say it's deutschland.de, which is also up on our socials. So there is the path where I can look for the opportunities myself, right? As a Kenyan who's nimejituma. I go to Make It in Germany. I go to Hub. I think there's one called Hub for Africa.Bayern, and so on. I go up there and I find a job and I start the process. And many Kenyans do find opportunities this way. Then you go through the process of having your qualifications checked, and so on and so forth. Secondly, you could work with a recruiter. Right? You can work with a recruiter in Kenya, and a number of recruiters. As I remember when I mentioned, we had a meeting. Part of the things we did last week, was meetings between Kenyan recruiters and German recruiters. A number of Kenyans have already been recruiting for the German market, and now we expect to see that kicking up. Okay, so a number of recruiters who recruit for Germany, some of them will have those jobs actually on the NEA website, which we've discussed before. That's neims.go.ke.
The National Employment Authority.
Exactly, the National Employment Authority. So they will have opportunities there, and they say this is in Germany. We are looking for vets, or I'm looking for 20 people who do animal husbandry. I don't know what a person who does animal husbandry is called, but yes. So that and they will usually list those. There are a number of Kenyan diaspora-owned recruitment businesses. So Kenyans who live and work in Germany who own recruitment businesses, who then recruit from Nairobi or from Kenya because they understand both parts of the market. So Diaspora is also playing a critical role in making sure that we can implement this agreement. But beyond that, we expect to be able to create more programs as we go along within the Diaspora Placement Agency, which is the agency or the quote unquote parastatal that is owned by our State Department, then to be able to structure those kinds of programs. So these are the places you can begin to find opportunities. Next Friday, on the 27th of September, 27th of September, we actually have German companies coming to Kenya to recruit during a job fair that they are hosting here in Nairobi. So movement is already happening, and these are some of the places that you'll find this information. But we understand that implementation is a long-term thing. So as information becomes available, one of the things that we will do at the State Department is we will continue to supply information, and you'll be able to see it as we go along, as we make materials available. But also we want... remember, we want this agreement implemented, right? We've worked very hard to negotiate it. We don't want to negotiate a market access agreement, then Kenyans don't.
Then you don't take
advantage of it.
Absolutely.
The Principal Secretary for Diaspora Affairs, Roseline Njogu, is still our guest. How many Kenyans live and work in Germany at present?
About 30,000.
30,000?
Yes.
What are they doing?
Various things. You have professors, you have business people, you have transport workers, you have lots of nurses and healthcare workers. It's the whole sort of gamut of Kenyans living and working in Germany. Yes.
Our friend who listens to this show almost daily, George Taita, lives and works in the transport industry in Germany. So many, when they heard about this agreement that has been signed, they thought, why? Why go and work in Germany?
Why go and work in Germany?
Yeah.
I think we spoke about why the jobs are needed in Germany, but also why work in Germany, because you get to find a good job, a good wage or salary, new experiences. But also, I think one of the most interesting things about what this agreement could bring is what we are looking at in terms of skills and technology transfer now from a macro level as a country. The German, of course, German is a large automotive, what do you call it? Manufacturer. And the large companies are supported by the Mittelstand, the small and SMEs, right, through manufacturing. So the SMEs will manufacture bolts, they'll manufacture components of vehicles for the larger, vehicle makers, manufacturers, and so on. A lot of the Kenyans who will take up opportunities will probably work in these spaces, right?
Yeah.
You'll work in either in the large automotive companies or in the smaller businesses creating these components. Think about that, what would mean in about 15 years or 20 years. How many Kenyans will have gained the capacity or the skill or the technology to do this kind of work? And if diasporas have taught me anything, is that many diasporians are constantly looking to go back home. As it should be, right? You're looking, or your heart is always, or you're a child of two worlds. Your heart is always looking to go home. And when they have an opportunity to do that, then it is our hope that we will have built a critical mass of skill and technology that know how to build this. In 10 years or so, you start to see some of that manufacturing moving here, because now you have a critical skill of people who can build these parts. But also at some point, it makes more sense to move manufacturing to where the people are, as opposed to where the people are not, where you have to bring in all these people. So now suddenly we build our own automotive industry, at the very least one that's something that supports the automotive industry. So think about what that would mean in terms of if you have a critical mass of Kenyans who can build vehicle parts.
Yeah.
You move a number of German manufacturing plants here. You move a number of Japanese manufacturing plants here. Suddenly, through diaspora skill transfer, you have built an entire section of the economy that didn't really exist, or existed sort of in a small way just 10 years before that.
Yeah.
It would take a different approach, a much more expensive approach, to sort of do it in any other way. Right, so you do that for the skills, for the skill and technology transfer. And this is a story of many countries. When we think about diaspora jobs, there is a tendency to focus on the short term Why are you taking so many people abroad? Why can't you create jobs here? And so valid questions. But part of that game, as I have said before, is the long game. You've got to think about, and this is what governments have to do, you have to think about what it looks like in 40 years.
Yeah.
In 40 years, you have an army of people who are trained in, creating German vehicles, for example. That immediately means that you can have that manufacturing moving here. But also what you see with diasporas is that when I talked about them wanting to constantly come home, is that also their hearts are constantly at home. People are always looking to make a difference. How can we do something at home? What can it's more of a tag me in, coach, right? I want to do something about home. The skills transfer, the technology transfer, the opportunity to even invest back home is huge. And some of these things don't require being gone 10, 20 years. Let me give you an example of a number of Kenyans who live and work in Seattle, for example. A lot of Kenyans are in the home care business, right? Caring for people end of life, or persons with disability, or people who need assisted living. Kenyans have become, it's an extremely attractive business, and a lot of Kenyans are in it.
Yep.
What that means is in another 10 years, as we age out of work, or as our parents are beginning to age out of work, parents who do not want to go and live in shags, we have a generation that is coming that will not want to go and retire in shags and so on.
They actually don't even have shags.
They don't have shags, right? So their shags is
urban.
Is here in Nairobi. You need a solution to care for our loved ones in this way. These diasporians who are already in this business immediately can plug in, and we've already started to see it, building care homes here in the city where they can bring their skill, their knowledge, importantly, their networks, right? They already know, how do you fund this? How does the model work? And so on. Now think about this. If you're able to build up these care homes here in Nairobi, because this is a job you have done in Seattle for the last 10 years, and you care for your parents, you care for your friends' parents, and so on, you start to bring skills that intersect in a beautiful way. Kenya, for example, has a wealth of healthcare workers, right? So we have, I believe, something like 45 KMTC colleges, right? I think only 2 counties don't have a KMTC college. So we train a lot of healthcare workers. Kenya also trains a lot of hospitality workers, right? So if you travel anywhere, you will find Kenyans serving in hotels, as managers, as wait staff, as cooks, as chefs, and that kind of thing, or even in the Maritimes, right? So when you put those two together, and you put our beautiful climate, right? We live at the equator. We have fantastic weather all year round. Life is not too expensive here compared, say, to places in Europe. Then you have a fantastic retirement proposition, where you tell people who think of someone who retires, a nurse who retires from the UK with a pension. Their pension might not take them, very, very far. But if you come and live in Nanyuki, where you have all of this healthcare workforce, and you have all of this hospitality workforce,
and beautiful weather, yeah, and it's home.
And exactly. So, and even if it's not home, even for other people who want to come and retire here, immediately we now start attracting a different kind of people, a different kind of capital. Right? So we've built a whole new industry, largely from our diaspora minds, our diaspora ideas, diaspora investment, but also skills transfer. So you bring that here. And you can think about interventions like that in almost every sector.
Okay.
So diaspora going out and do, and not just for the short term, but the short term is important, right? People have to eat, people have to pay school fees, people have to live, but also people have to use the skill that they have spent money and time and families have sacrificed to acquire. But beyond that, we have to think about what is the long game? Are we always going to be in the business of, incentivizing people or facilitating people to go? Not necessarily, right? So when you see lots and lots of housekeepers going to the Middle East, for example, our hope always is that is their children will not need to do that. They do that so that their children can go to school and be able to pick up a different kind of job, right? So that is the call of our time, but also that is the advantage that we currently have.
So Germany is one of those countries whereby you have to speak German.
Yes.
To operate in almost everything.
Yes.
There's very little English speaking. And how does that come into the agreement or into the arrangement that has been made country to country?
Right. So that's a really good question. And one of the ones that keep coming up all the time is, do I really have to speak German to go? Ama mtanitafutia kazi tu hata ya ng'ombe. So that where I don't need to speak much German. There are places where you might not need, C1, right? You can get away with A1 or A2. But it is extremely important for any kind of migrant to be able to fit into a new country. If you don't speak the language, that is the fastest way of excluding yourself. You will not succeed. So you learn enough, and there's now a number of colleges, including the TVETs, who are now running German language classes. You can pick them up online. You learn enough. Some employers require that you have a certain level, right? So you start with A1, or if you're going to work in healthcare, it's a much more higher requirement of C1, because you must be able to speak to your patients and so on. But my recommendation and what we are seeing is that learn the language and learn well. Last week when we had the diaspora engagement, somebody told the president that here you could be a professor and not speak English and not speak German, or you could be what she called a D+ student. These are her words. You could be a D+ student, but speak German and you will get ahead faster. So it is, you do yourself a disservice by not learning the language. My own German is many years ago from high school, but I've been dusting it off. And it does help to speak to people, even government officials on the other side, in a little bit of their language, and this sort of helps move things. So definitely learn the language. There are facilities. I've seen some counties, for example, really grab this agreement and run with it. Embu County, for example, the governor, I think, is putting some sort of money or scholarships in TVETs for people of Embu to learn German language. So as I keep saying, this agreement is for all of us. But there might be those who will run it, who will grab it and run with it and be able to make it sooner rather than later. So what I would like to see, or what I hope to see, is more actions like what we saw from Governor Mbarire, saying, okay, so this is the opportunity. How can we take advantage of it? Okay, let me see how many I can sponsor at the TVET and so on, so people can begin to
take advantage of it.
Exactly, absolutely.
You've sold it quite well with the skills transfer, technology transfer and all, and looking at the future and seeing the present. Now, is the government helping Kenyans when it comes to dealing with the German embassy in Kenya, or with all the other bilateral labor agreements that you've signed with the various countries? Does the government help the applicant, especially with that move? So
part of the agreement actually with the Germans is they also have obligations on their part, including streamlining their processes within the German embassy here in Nairobi to make those processes move faster, right? So one of the things that I have seen them do is I want to say 2 weeks ago or so, an advert for visa clerks and that kind of thing. So I know they're expanding their capacity. The German government has also talked about digitizing their processes so that their consulates, and the Chancellor also spoke about this last week when we were there, so that their consulates and embassies are able to move much faster, or are able to be more efficient. Kenyans, I think, seem to be surprised by the fact that not everybody has digital services across various governments, because I think we're so used to it. But so they are making their own moves in terms of how to make sure the bottleneck is not here, so that movement can go. Again, remember, as I said earlier, this is a win-win agreement. They also need good workers. It is not just Kenyans who need jobs. They also need good workers. We're also seeing a push from their own companies, right? So their own industry is saying, can you help us get through this in a faster way? Can embassy, can their interior ministry, or whoever is concerned move things? So we have the push and pull from both sides. But I think we have a real commitment from Ambassador Sebastian Groth's team here in Nairobi to make this work. We've worked very closely with them even as we were preparing for these visits, and they've been very consultative. There's a real commitment, as I have seen it from the German government, to actually implement this agreement and implement it well.
So there's reality at the national level.
Yeah.
In all these European countries, we are facing labor shortage. Then they are faced with this other reality that for us to address this, we'll need to accept people to come into our country, and then there's migration issues.
Yeah.
So there are people in Europe who are not happy.
Absolutely.
With the issue of migrants.
Migration is a very touchy subject.
It's a very touchy issue.
It's a very touchy issue, and over the last few years, we've seen a rise of nationalism across the world,
Yes.
right? So there's a real wave of sort of very right-wing ideology that is anti-migration.
Across Europe. In
Across
Germany
Europe.
itself, in fact, in the last election, this was one of a campaign issue, right?
Yes.
So how does our
see
government sort out our Kenyans who are going into a country that a section of the country is welcoming, and then there's a section of the country that is not welcoming?
So that's a good question, and I'm not even sure it's a government question, right? It's a society question. It is a question of the lived reality sometimes of racism, right? Any of us who has lived in a country where you're the minority, you're aware of how dark you are, how different your hair is, and so on. And in some places, it is said to you, right? So there is that element of being a migrant or being a diaspora in a society that is also now becoming very polarized around those issues. And it is a global question. It is not just a question of Europe or a question of Germany in particular. It is a US question. It is a Middle East question. It is the question of every black man or woman walking the earth in 2024.
Yeah.
Yes.
What can we do about it? There is little you can do about the other person. What we are doing is to try and quote unquote harden the target. Right. So give resources to Kenyans, first of all, to understand their rights, but also to prepare them. Many Kenyans who've never left home have not experienced racism. You might have experienced tribalism or negative ethnicity, but you might not have experienced racism, and some of it is just going to catch you completely off guard. So the most we can do as a government, apart from, of course, advocating with other governments and ensuring that our people are not being targeted, in the agreement, of course, we have conversations around the welfare of Kenyans living and working abroad and so on. Is to give resources and say, this is a pre-departure package, right? This is what you need to know. But also, these are the various diaspora associations and formations in Germany. Plug into these groups so that you can have your own social support and so on. Of course, globally, even at the UN level, there is work that is being done, anti-discrimination work and work around persons of African descent and that kind of support and so on. But we are living in a society that is polarized, where people have the right to basically say horrible things to you.
Yeah.
And it is constitutionally protected.
But then on the other side, there is a responsibility of our government to make sure that it's ready to immediately deploy support for our Kenyans in those countries.
Yes, absolutely.
Take, for example, what was happening in the UK a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Right? Where suddenly there's a wave and a rise in a wave of basically anti-immigrant sentiment.
Yeah.
And you're caught in between. So how prepared is the State Department for Diaspora Affairs, the ministry as a whole, to be on the lookout and to support these Kenyans on a moment's notice?
We are, remember, there's, how do I put it? Things like this happen of various kinds. It might be an anti-migrant sentiment that rises across the society, which you really pray it doesn't, because when something is that widespread, then it is very difficult to deal with. But also remember, let me say before I get into interventions, is that while you have a number of people who are anti-migration, you also have a number of people who recognize their country is not going to do well without bringing in other people. And they are the ones who come pursuing, Kenyan labor and so on. So there are allies. It is not, Now, we are prepared in the same way that we are prepared to evacuate Kenyans from war, right? So when you have movements in places like Lebanon, for example, we have an entire department whose job is to think about and prepare for evacuations and that kind of thing. So the ministry is set up for that. But in places where we have large diasporas as well, we are now in the process of deploying diaspora officers whose entire job is not political work, is not, it's not even consular work, which is usually done by our immigration people. It's not even, properly speaking, labor work that's done by labor attaches, is to look out for the welfare of diaspora, to track these kinds of things and be able to be on the ready. So we have set ourselves up, and we will continue to set ourselves up to be ready to respond to these people. Remember, over the next few years, we expect to see a real growth in our diaspora. From the 3-4 million that we expect, especially with programs like this, that the numbers are going to grow. You must also grow the base. You must grow the capital so that we're able to handle and support those growing numbers.
Okay. What are some of the things that you've heard since this announcement that are just not true, that would require some clarification on your part?
Gosh. So it's a laundry list, of course, and I don't know that it makes. And I think we clarified many of them when there were conversations about whether this is a quota-based agreement and so on. I issued a press statement clarifying that what we have is a no quota agreement. There are things that one should not bother responding to. Right, such as the usual things of, we know these jobs are only going to your people. There are things.
You have a quota.
I have a quota. Or there are things around. There's very nasty conversations around. You will not be able to find skilled workers in Kenya. So just a lot of uninformed, quite simply, nonsense that people should not have to respond to. But I think the main issues that needed clarification have been responded to. What we need to do, however, is, remember I said that it's in our interest, all of us, to make sure that this agreement is implemented and implemented well. Is now a proper stakeholder engagement. We've done some of that while we've been negotiating, but now is to go and sit with the TVETs and say, this is what is in store for us. How do we set ourselves up to take up this advantage? And then do the same thing with universities, do the same thing with various groups. So that is the next part of the job. Clarifying, having conversations, answering, meeting with Ngao officers, chiefs, and so on, basically explaining so that people on the ground completely understand what is available to them and how they could potentially take up those advantages. And then, of course, a real engagement with our diaspora. But we've engaged our diaspora, especially even during the negotiation of this agreement. They were involved, and we're continuing to engage them in terms of how do they welcome newcomers, how do they support, and you will be glad to note that one of the things they said is, we want you to really involve us in welcoming the newcomers, which is fantastic. Wow. Because then they're able to tell you what things really on ground are like. So it's that stakeholder engagement, just to make sure that the misconceptions are dealt with, but more importantly, that people have the information they need to be able to take up this, to take up the opportunities that are available, and then finally for us to keep the conversation going so that we don't lose out on that return leg that I spoke about. Okay. How do we make sure that as talent is leaving, we will be able to track it so that at some point we can see, the investments that I spoke about, the skills transfer that I spoke about, and so on.
In a minute,
yeah.
How does one tell that an agency that's recruiting for Germany or for any other country is genuine or not?
This is a question I think I answer every day on social media. But it's very easy. On the NEA website, the National Employment Authority website, and my team can actually post that as well, you will find the list of everybody who is an authorized, licensed, and current recruitment agent for overseas jobs. Okay, so the NEA maintains a list because NEA regulates recruitment agencies. So on the NEA website, the National Employment Authority website, there is a list of recruitment agents who are licensed. On the Kenya Maritime Authority website as well, there is a list of the companies that are authorized to recruit for maritime jobs. And I hope at some point we'll be able to have a chance to speak about this new area of maritime jobs that promises so much for Kenyans. In the, what do you call it? In the seas, not overseas, but on the actual in the sea. Yeah, Baharini. So those two, absolutely. So those two, that's where you find the information.
Okay.
If you're not sure, you can always check with us on social media, but please go there first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Roseline Njogu, Principal Secretary for Diaspora Affairs, has been our guest this hour, just showing us the opportunities that are there with the newly signed Comprehensive Migration and Mobility Partnership Agreement with Germany.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.